Good evening. Tonight is Wednesday, June 8th, and this is the Princeton School Board of Education meeting. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
Good evening. Tonight is Wednesday, June 8th, and this is the Princeton School Board of Education meeting. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. The board has just been in our executive session. We're now back in public session, and our first order of business is to approve the agenda as stated. Can I get a motion? Can I get a second? All in favor? Before we do the consent agenda, we have a recognition this evening of our Future Business Leaders of America students.
Yes, I'd like to welcome one of our high school teachers and our advisor to the Future Business Leaders of America Club, James Kicks, to introduce the students she has with us and the competition that they recently returned from, and give us an overview of FBLA, what it is, what they do, and why that's so important. So,
thank you so much. Again, my name is Nancy Anderson. I'm the advisor for Future Business Leaders here at the high school. Since the club is primarily run by the students with a little bit of guidance from me, I'm going to hand it over to them to talk about their involvement in the club.
Hi everyone, I'm Nish Mystery, I'm a senior. I'd first like to thank the Board of Education and Administration for the support of FBLA. And I'd also like to thank Mrs. J for being a great advisor for the past 4 years. I've been a member of FBLA for the past 4 years since freshman year, but I've been involved for a lot longer. My sister was actually in the club, and she kind of pulled me into fundraising and all the other events that they did, so I've been involved for a while. And she's the reason why I joined. She convinced me, so as soon as freshman year started, I kind of went to meetings, and it changed the path of my life. I'm going to Northeastern in the fall, and I will be majoring in computer science and economics, and without FBLA, I probably would have never considered even thinking about economics or anything business related. And through the past 4 years, I've participated and placed at states, and even went to nationals in San Antonio my freshman year, and I'll be going back again this year to Chicago, and hopefully I'll place in entrepreneurship. For the past year, I've served as the state parliamentarian for New York State FBLA. So we serve thousands of members in New York State FBLA, and I work with a lot of the other officers on the national level, and it's been super cool learning from all of them. I've learned so many lessons and made priceless memories, and even lifelong friends. Some of my closest friends are from FBLA, so I'm super blessed to have them. And I just like to thank you all for having clubs like FBLA. It's what makes Hendrick Hudson special, and just want to thank you.
Good evening. My name is Logan Googleman, and I'm a junior. I've been a member of the FBLA since freshman year. I began competing last year in the COVID year and have since continued to the State Leadership Conference in April. Each year, I've also participated in Fill Us, our food drive. FBLA is also responsible for helping with the back to school night the school runs. Competing behind the screen is definitely less nerve-wracking than competing in front of judges this year. And when doing the conference over the screen, I competed in 3 events and placed in each one. At SLC a few months ago, Kayla and I competed in 3 joint events and placed in 2 of them, business ethics and publication design, which we were invited to nationals for. Doing a competition at home was a lot less enjoyable than the competition out. It felt more like a school presentation or project when doing it at home. When in person, it was a lot more enjoyable, and it felt like you were doing a presentation, but also having fun. Competitors were able to network by meeting one another and collaborate by giving each other tips. FBLA offers so many great opportunities to students by giving them chances to grow as presenters and managers. Thank you, Board of Education.
Hello, I'm Peter Koshik, and I'm also a junior. Like Logan, I joined FBLA as a freshman, and I plan to compete at the State Leadership Conference that year before COVID derailed things. Fortunately, we've had SLC the last 2 years, and I couldn't be more grateful because SLC provides me with opportunities to network and to be introduced to a business atmosphere and learn about subjects that I might be interested in going forward, like sports and entertainment management, which I competed in. And I think as someone who's been part of the business program at our school and who might be interested in going to the business field after high school. I thought SLC and FBLA as a whole was very helpful in contributing to my education in business and honestly inspiring me to maybe go into that field. And I'd like to thank you guys for allowing this club and all the opportunities it brings, like SLC and like our Philadelphia fundraiser, to go on.
Hello, my name is Kate Cohen and I'm also a junior. This was my first year at FBLA and I couldn't be happier that I joined it. So during my time this year, I took up some of the many opportunities that FBLA has to offer, including the State Leadership Conference this past April. At this conference, as Logan said, we were very successful, but we also made lasting friendships that I'm sure will continue into the conference next year. And with this being my first year, I was truly surprised at how fun and helpful FBLA is. While it was nerve-wracking to present at the conference in front of judges, I know for certain that my experience doing so will help me in my future endeavors. Additionally, SLC allowed me to see how close-knit FBLA is, making the experience even more enjoyable and memorable. Thank you again, Board of Education, for allowing this club to run in our school and giving us opportunities like SLC, because it definitely changed my high school experience for the better.
So 4 people went to the State Leadership Conference in Rochester. 4 people came home with 2 awards each. It was a fantastic event. I was so proud of them all. And, again, thank you for just letting this happen and letting the kids shine. Anyone have any questions? All right, thank you very much and have a good night.
So all of you, it sounds like you're getting some really excellent connections and experiences. That brings us to our consent agenda. You guys are welcome to stay if you would like. Oh, great, all right. So that brings us to our consent agenda. Would anybody like to pull anything from the consent agenda this evening? All right, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? Can I get a second? All in favor? Any abstentions? So there was one item that had been removed from the consent agenda, which was a donation. It's a donation for an exercise bike for the Blue Mountain Middle School. The district has received a donation in the amount of $559.20 from the Blue Mountain Middle School PTA for an exercise bike for the fitness club students and the students in the PE classes in the Blue Mountain Middle School. Thank you very much to the middle school PTA. You guys have done a great job fundraising this year, and I love these creative donations that we're getting for the middle school. Thank you. I get a motion to approve this item for the agenda. So let me get a second. All in favor? Thank you. All right, superintendent's report.
Yeah, 2 brief updates before I turn it over to our team. Follow up from our meeting last week. We discussed some opportunities perhaps with our municipalities for cell phone tower in our school district. In fact, there's been quite a bit of discussion regarding cell phone towers. The town of Cortland did petition Westchester County, who is considering putting up a 180-foot emergency communication tower to allow outside cell phone companies to use that tower to also transmit to improve their signal. So that is a petition that the town of Cortland has sent to the county executive. We also sent a letter of support for the exact same reason to the county executive. And in conversations I had today with the town of Cortland, there apparently is a business developer who is developer who is interested in putting up a cell phone tower within our school district. And they are working with the town to go through the approval process and understand what those demands are, what the timeline is. And the town has indicated that they will have a public hearing on that matter either in August or September. So if we can't partner with the county to improve our cell phone signal, certainly the town is evaluating other opportunities to do so. And once that date for the hearing has been set, we'll make sure we share that with our community as well. The location of either tower will drastically improve cell phone communications on the northeast side of our district. So that's basically Blue Mountain Middle School and Furnace Woods. It also will improve some dead zones on A, and will also improve cell phone signal down toward the river, particularly at the Plank Elementary School, for those who live off of or in that neighborhood as well. So the proposal for the location of the towers will meet many of the iffy cell phone signal issues that we have in our district. So once we hear back from the county, we will let you know. And if the town is going forward with this proposal, part of their process is to have a public hearing, and we'll make sure that our community knows about that and the timeline, what the potentialities of that. With that update, we talked last week about the potential of having an additional school resource officer next year. As I reported last week, we had been talking to the county police about that, and they have agreed, or they have confirmed for us that if we choose to have an additional resource officer next year, that position would be able to be easily staffed from the county police, and that they are going to send documentation for the board to consider at next Tuesday's meeting to amend the current contract. It was 4 years ago that the school district entered into a 5-year agreement with Westchester County for school resource officer. We can amend that contract for 1 more year to include an additional school resource officer. So we're in deliberations with the county, and if that paperwork comes to us in a timely manner, we'll present it next week at the board for your consideration. Any questions on those topics before I turn it over to Lisa and Margaret? Okay, Margaret, do you want to give a quick update first, and then Lisa?
Good evening, everyone. I'll focus my update on the UPK program. So we did pull the lottery a week ago, Friday, and parents have been informed if they were accepted into the Frank G program or our collaborator, a Rising Star, which is on Scenic Drive down in Crokey, right at the end of the district. There is a wait list, not a large one, but a wait list nonetheless. And I have been speaking with parents who are on the wait list to try to explain the process, if there are any next steps. It is unlikely that there would be any openings in the district program, but there may be openings in the collaborators program going forward. So we will keep everybody informed. Next steps with our expectant parents is to provide them with a link to registration. And they'll follow the same registration process that anyone coming in K-12 would. That means online, proof of residency, etc. And then working with Dr. Kramer, who's here this evening, Jen Lefevre and Tammy Manuello, who are the 2 UPK teachers, to set up a screening before we close at the end of June. We will screen all children in our district program, as well as the children going to the collaborator. We'll keep them informed of what we've learned, etc. And we're looking forward to finalizing our decision about curriculum and materials. That's what we're.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our work-based learning project that we have going in the district. We started it at our high school a couple years ago. Our kids have been going to Avelinos. They've been going into the library at the Henham Free Library. They've been doing some things around the school, but we're now formalizing it. So I met with our transition coordinator, work-based learning coordinator this morning, and we have secured places at Old Navy and the Henham Free Library, of course. We are in Premier as well. We're hoping to expand from the gym into the restaurant. And she has a couple other sites that she's just waiting to get confirmation. One is actually going to be us partnering with a post-21 or adult service for our students. That is happening for our special education students, but I'm also working with Deb Cardenas at high school, our 9th grade counselor, who is beginning to start the CDOS process and putting the bones of a program together. What does it look like? So she's working with our state representative and meeting with him, and then she'll go out and look at other districts, and then we'll come together as a team at the high school to start a CDOS program, which is your credential for work-based stuff that we would send kids to BOCES for, but we're hoping to develop a program in-house. So we do have next year on slate, we do have my office currently take students to do some work in our office. They do some shredding, some copying, some packets. The high school custodians are taking students on and they're working with them within the school. The kids are doing copying right now. They used to go to Frank G and Furnace Woods and do work before COVID. So we're hoping to get back to that. So that's exciting news for us. And it's something that I know that is also in the strategic plan, but we got way ahead of it because we've been doing it for a couple of years. We're just going to really codify it over the next few years for all students to have the ability. The other thing that's very exciting in our middle school is, excuse me, I worked with Mr. Owens about 6 months ago and Mr. Marlini to work on developing a room very similar to our high school salad room for our students, to work on ADL skills, our washing and drying, and how to do daily living skills and task bins and just skills that our kids don't have. And I'm not talking just special ed kids, I'm talking all kids. So Mrs. Donahue is getting a new classroom next year. It's going to be, we're doing a lot of construction in there and we're putting some new appliances in there. So she will start the process with her classroom, and hopefully Ms. Jack Antonio from the 4 or 5 at Furnace Woods will come up and bring her students. But eventually I'm hoping that Mrs. Donahue will work with a lot of the middle school staff to do some ADLs and work on some life skills with all kids. So that's exciting news that we're starting, and we're a little bit ahead of the strategic plan. But again, we've been working on this for many months, or several years actually. But it has really come to fruition. It's very exciting for all. So I'm very excited to see what happens and next steps once we get the kids involved. Any questions?
Can you just tell the public what CDOT stands for?
Lisa, why don't you go ahead? This is Lisa's great thing. I waited for her to do this the other day.
Career development and occupational studies.
So there are specific standards for career development and occupational studies. Usually you'll find them at BOCES. You don't really find them here. Maura Koch did do some of those with her CTE degree. So that was happening to a certain extent here in the school, but this will be a little bit more in depth.
I love that we're expanding these programs so more students can experience them. Is it the unpaid internship that they're just doing for the experience to build a resume, or is there any compensation?
It's going to depend because there's different ways of getting compensation. When I was a BOCES employee, we actually paid our kids. It's a little bit different when you're in a public school versus BOCES. So we do have an opportunity for students with disabilities. There's a couple different tracks, is Access VR and OPWDD. So Office for people with developmental disabilities works with our students that have IEPs. Access VR is anybody that has a disability. It can be a 504 plan student, so it can be anybody that has a diagnosis before the age of 22. They can get support through Access VR. And Mrs. Cardenas is also the one that makes sure all of our families in the high school are getting the Access VR paperwork. We used to wait till the junior year. They're now telling us to start in 9th grade because there's work training, there's training for how to get your license. So they'll work with you. There's lots of different coaches for students that have anything from basic anxiety up to ADHD that's out of, that's really high and intense. So it really depends on what the disability is. So all of that is happening. And through OPWDD, for students that have an IEP, there's also called the Employee Training Program. So students get paid through that the last 2 years of their school, 19 to 20, 20 to 21 before they exit, and they get compensated through the state. So they do get compensated, but we as a district can't pay students. But they are getting the experience, and a lot of times I'm hoping, I have one student right now, I won't say where, but I'm hoping they hire her. I would love to hire her here as a custodial staff because she is so good. But these are the things that we're doing, is making sure they get into jobs. Old Navy will, about 80% of the time, will hire our students. When I was with BOCES, they'll come in and they will train our students. They will do a lot of PD fun exercises, but they'll also hire our students at the end if they're really extreme, amazing workers.
Thank you.
All right, that will bring us to our presentation, which is our elementary academic program update.
So here we have Margaret introduce our esteemed panel of speakers and kick off our presentation. We have Josh Cohen, Cindy Kramer, and Donna Teresi with us to give the board and the public that's here and watching at home an overview of this year. As everyone understands, this was still not a normal year. We're still technically in a pandemic and operating under some various guidance from state education department. And while the needle is moving and we're moving away from a lot of the mandates that we've had over the last 26 months, we do believe that a return to normal is on the horizon. But entering this school year, particularly at our elementary schools, our focus was on student support, professional development, and supporting students socially and emotionally. And I'll have Margaret introduce it.
Yeah, so very much, I think the four of us would agree that this is a COVID recovery year. We started the year by really wondering how students would be returning to us, both academically and, of course, socially, emotionally. Some not have been in school, in a few kids in a year. Some kids have been in and out. So we, I think, worked hard to be prepared for both supporting those two aspects of our children. And I think, as you'll hear tonight, that we've certainly done a very good job of that at the elementary level, and we'll talk about secondary next week. So I think in order that it's Donna first, am I correct? So Donna, and then I think it's Josh and Cindy, okay?
Good evening, everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm Donna Teresi. I'm the principal of Princeton. So one of the biggest aspects of everything is we look at the data that's in front of us. And we were concerned because the K-1 students really didn't have the true experience that they needed. So with Margaret and our team, we actually looked at all the data and said, where would we target a program where we can give some more academic services that we normally wouldn't get it? And that was targeted to the 2-3. So he has my slides. I'm not a slide reader. I'm more of a slide explainer. And so with the bridge program, this targeted 2nd and 3rd grades. And normally academic intervention services are given to students that need support in ELA, math, and writing. But normally it's 35 to 40 minutes. And we felt these students needed a lot more than the 35 to 40 minutes. So we gave them what was called an hour and a half, which was really a very data-driven. We actually looked at the individual students. We catered into, we looked at where they would be both in phenomic awareness and comprehension and their writing skills. So if you go to the bridge program in 2-3, you'll actually see 20 minutes of real good Wilson, PAF, LLI, all of those different things that the reading teacher specializes in, and then moving into comprehension and writing. And she piggybacked the teacher. Now, are they losing time in the class? I know that's always a concern. No, they are not. At that time, the teacher in the classroom is working on ELA, math, and reading, and they are getting a smaller group in the classroom. So no one was losing out on social studies, science, or anything that they needed to make up. In some ways, TC units, sometimes they would introduce the writing in a smaller group and break it down for them a little bit more. I have seen children going from very low A, Bs in Fontes and Pinnell, now going to H's and I's. So they were K-1 coming in and now really moving to 2-3. This is a wonderful program. I'm familiar with it more in a K-1 for an early intervention piece, but really we had to reach out to those students who really didn't get the true experience of a full-time kindergarten first grade. I think we were very successful. I wish I had the data for the end of the year, but unfortunately we're in the process of doing that. But I know it's going to be really, really wonderful. Oh, did I forget something?
So, so initially, Donna is absolutely correct. We targeted 2 and 3 because we looked at the data that we had coming into the year, and those were the kids who were way below level. And that was because they were first and second graders, and that's a really hard time to miss face-to-face instruction. So we worked collaboratively at Frank G and at BV where the greatest need was to build that. I will say that we actually added on in both schools at the upper grades. We added on one in Donna's building, a 5th, was it 4th?
It was, I'm sorry, 5th grade.
5th grade, which we went in and did that, and in Josh's school, was it 4th grade? So in all cases, we found, thankfully, very good success. We had great teachers that raised their hand to do this with us. And as my colleagues know, I am not an educator that believes in retention. And believe me, if you were reading educational literature in the past 2 or 3 years, there were some crazy suggestions. Like one very prominent writer said, oh, we should just leave everybody back a year. And, you know, I started to panic about what that was going to look like. So that's when we put our heads together and said, we need to do something to keep them in their grade level curriculum, but really provide them with a boost so that they're not being punished for a pandemic. And that's really what it comes down to. Nobody had the situation happen to them because they did something wrong. We had to respond in a way that kept them with their peers and kept them in their grade level learning, but gave them the extra lift that they needed. So I want to thank everybody that did this, both the administrators that worked with me, the teachers that worked to staff the pullout, and the classroom teachers that gave up those students and worked collaboratively with the teacher doing the pullout. So thank you, everybody, because this has been a really good experience.
And also we want to thank the RTI, now known as HHCSD. I'm going to write a book when I retire in acronyms. And let me tell you something. This was a 4 to 6 week delve into data with this team so that we can actually look where these students were and change the direction we were going to. And I think by doing this, we avoided what could have been a lot of classifications. Yes, sir.
So is there any, with this success, I would love to see the data once you guys have it available, but it sounds like it's been a successful program. Is there any plans to continue it for future years?
Yeah, we have been talking with Barbara, who's been very supportive about it, so we are looking at it. Again, once the data comes in, we'll be able to see what teachers will be targeted to work with those students and how we're going to move forward. Thank you. Thank you.
Say that I actually stole the idea for the framework from my colleague in PPS because the ICT skills program is intended to do almost the same thing. So I really looked at the success that we were having since we put that in place and said, what if we tried this with gen ed students? Would we have the kind of results that we were hoping for? And by and large, we did. I won't say across the board 100%, nothing is ever 100%. We are looking at it again for next year. We already looked at some of the data that we have to identify where we see opportunities for that in terms of grade levels. And then the teachers who've done it, with the exception of one who is now moving into a different position for us, are all very excited about the opportunity to do it again. They also felt that their kids moved faster. So that was a good thing. So I'm going to ask Josh Cohen to come up next and talk a little bit about the professional learning at the elementary schools this year and actually several years.
And just real quick, Josh, as a segue, just a reminder to everyone who's here, our benchmarking data system is to identify student progress and student growth over time. We used to rely on the New York State assessments in grades 3 through 8. And they weren't the best indicator. The state was very late in getting us data. In fact, we would receive student achievement data in November or December of the following year after we've already begun the next grade level. Then around 2014-15, when the Common Core Learning Standards came out, and there was a big push, that began by parents in New York State, was the opt-out movement, where parents were no longer going to subject their children in grades 3 through 8 to hours and hours of testing in ELA and math, and hours meaning 4 hours at a clip. And what ended up happening, one of the consequences of that was that the state continued with its testing regimen. So we were continuing to test students who showed up. And the sample size dwindled to such a degree that those results were proven to be statistically insignificant. So not only did we have data that was coming late, now we have bad data to usually make these sort of decisions about. So like many school districts, we identified local assessments, we call them benchmarks, and it's exactly what Dominic had mentioned, is that we're doing our year-end benchmarks. So to your question, Ellie, is to look at the data. We're about a week away from finishing that benchmark where we can then show and chart growth over time, or to students that struggle, be able to build some programs and opportunities over the summer so when they come back in September. But that was a burden that was placed on school districts to create its own assessment protocol because we couldn't rely on the state to do that.
So something that's forever is professional learning. And in addition to the benchmark data that we do at various points during the year, there's lots of other data that administrators gather, visit classrooms, see what the instructional, meet with grade level leaders and teams to see what things need to be worked on. So we've had a variety of consultants working around Readers and Writers Workshop for years, and this is kind of the final year as we segue towards building capacity of our own teacher leaders. So there's been meetings with grade level teams. There's been one-on-one coaching sessions where a consultant might watch a teacher teach and then give them feedback for the next visit. They might work on mentor texts. How are the classroom libraries? What are some pedagogical moves that could be made? Some common language that could be used. So that's been great. But again, we are nearing a time where we're going to have that teacher sustain this learning. So I think Dr. Weller has shared before some of the ideas for that. Other things that are happening are teachers meet regularly with each other in the building and as once a month or so across the 3 schools to talk about curriculum, data, look at student work, and a variety of other related topics. So that will continue again forever. They work with BOCES and Leslie River Teaching Center to identify learning needs and various opportunities. And most recently, there was a handle of care training in the Furnace Woods Gym, and that was elementary wide at the May 23rd release. So those are some things that I wanted to highlight.
What is handled with care training? What's handled with care training?
That is our de-escalation verbally that we use with all of our students. And if we have to, we restrain them, but we very rarely will put our hands on students. We try to verbally de-escalate. So we train anybody in the ABC class from aides to teachers. Social workers are all trained. Then we have trained the trainers. So in June, we will train high school staff and middle school, secondary will have it. And then it will be a train the trainers. We bring an outside company in, and we have about a dozen trainers. So anytime that we need a training in the school, we have people that can train our own people. So it's really to keep everybody safe if we ever need it, but it's more about the verbal de-escalation.
Sounds like good training for everybody.
Yes.
So before we move right on to the next section, I'll just footnote, Josh, we are working right now with HHEA to develop teacher leadership positions in both ELA and math as a way of sustaining the amazing work we've done. Probably 6 years of it with both reading and writing. And I actually met with grade level leaders last night to talk about how we should plan professional learning to support the new Words Their Way program that I think you heard Nikki and Jen talk about a week ago. Was it only a week ago? Yes. Okay. So next up, last but not least, Dr. Kramer is going to talk a little bit about social and emotional learning in this post-COVID year.
Thanks, Margaret. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. So as you can see on the slide, we have a mental health team with members in each of our school buildings. We have social workers, school counselors, school psychologists, and of course our school nurse. Some of those staff are shared between buildings. Right now we have, I believe, full-time counselors in each of the elementary schools, and then the other staff members are shared. Is that true? Not true? Sorry. Some of the elementary schools have full-time counselors.
I think it's full-time social worker psychologist.
That's what I meant, social workers. Sorry, thanks. Full-time social workers. And also the classroom teachers are listed because although they may not have the same formal training as the rest of the mental health team, they're often the first line of defense. They're the ones that might notice that a child's not quite themselves. They're the one a child might go to if they are having a problem and they need somebody to talk to. And then they would consult with the rest of the team as needed. So they are important members of the SEL team as well. Next slide. Some of the types of support that are provided, we have whole class lessons, of course, our second step program, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the counselors also push in to do bully prevention. They do personal safety lessons with every class, and then other topics as needed. Oftentimes, there'll be a situation that will arise in a classroom or on a grade level, and I'll talk to the counselor about addressing that with the group so that it can be handled and addressed. It might be a problem-solving issue on the playground. It could be something related to bullying, whatever the case may be. So they're always available to push in and do lessons as well. Small group lessons take place with the counselors and sometimes with the social workers. And those are usually focused on a specific area of need, such as social skills or a death in the family, a group of children who might be experiencing divorce or some type of trauma. And then individual support as needed, and that would be consulted with the classroom teacher and also with the family to make sure we're targeting what the students need. Our second step program is, you're probably familiar with that, that's been in place for a few years now at the elementary level, and that's our social emotional curriculum that the classroom teachers implement on a regular basis. They do weekly lessons on different topics. We talk about skills for learning, which focuses on focusing and attention and listening, self-talk, being assertive. Those are kind of the main components of that. We teach kids how to calm down when they're experiencing strong or big feelings. We teach them about empathy and sympathizing with others and having empathy for how others are feeling and what they're doing, and also problem-solving skills so that they have the tools to solve these things themselves as they get older. In addition to the weekly lessons, there's daily reinforcement that happens in every classroom and throughout the buildings. It's woven into our PBIS systems. I know in my morning announcements, I reinforce these things every week to just let the kids know that we're all on the same page and we're all using the same language and the same information. And then the counselor does the class lessons, which I mentioned previously, the anti-bullying and the personal safety both are part of the second step program. This year, we've been getting back to normal, and that's been important to the social and emotional health of our students and our staff and our families. So as you know, masks became optional mid-year, which has been wonderful. Teachers have been able to return to small group work more easily, and kids have been able to push their desks together and work together more easily. We've opened up the schools, so we're having in-person assemblies. We have concerts this week and next week at the buildings. Field trips are starting up again, and parent volunteers are coming in. We had a kindergarten class today at First Woods who had parents in for a writing celebration and a class tea. And the school fairs have all been happening. So getting back to normal, and hopefully the kids are feeling that emotionally as well. Of course, as we're transitioning to Princeton plan, there is a social and emotional component to that as well. And as you know, we've had many events and activities taking place that are aimed at supporting the children in that realm. So we've had to meet the principals, we've had building tours, the Pen Pal initiative, which many classes are still communicating with each other across the buildings. We have grade level field days next week. So each grade level band is going to travel to their new school for a couple of hours on Tuesday. And the phys ed teachers are planning some fun activities for them, and they'll have lunch with their friends from the other schools. We will have August meet and greets so that the kids can see their new school and meet their classroom teacher before the school year begins. And we're finalizing our plans for our new PBIS acronym, which will make sure that all the elementary schools are on the same page with regards to positive behavior supports and behavior throughout the buildings. And the counselors have been supporting this as needed, the social workers as well, so that, if a child's having anxiety about the transition or they're not sure about something, they step in and they support the classroom teachers in addressing those needs. So, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. I thank all of the elementary principals for coming in this evening. It's been incredibly trying 3 years. So thank you for all of your hard work and for joining us this evening. So that brings us to our first audience comment section. At this section of the meeting, we do invite the public to make comments to the board. In order to make comments, each speaker should sign in with the district clerk prior to commenting. When called, each speaker should step up to the podium, state their name and affiliation if applicable prior to starting their comment. Letters, petitions, or other written material should be handed to the district clerk prior to their commenting. Each speaker is permitted 3 minutes for their comments and must be recognized by the board president. All comments should be directed to the board. The board will listen to comments, but will not necessarily debate or discuss items. Operational matters will be directed to school administrators for handling. The board is not permitted to address personnel or individual student matters in open session. And the board may limit repetitive comments in order to give time to others wishing to speak, as well as to maintain meeting efficiency. The board expects comments to be made without interference from the audience and in a civil manner. Thank you. Carmen, are there any speakers this evening?
We have one speaker, originally it was going to be a non-agenda item, 36, which is regarding school safety. But since Joe did touch on that.
That's fine.
That's fine, she comes
Yeah,
up with
sure.
that.
Hi again, I'm Terry Sinks. I have a 5th grader at FGL and a 6th grader at Blue Mountain. I just wanted to thank you for listening last week. I appreciate your consideration, and I implore the community out there watching to make your support of this initiative for an additional SRO for this district heard to the Board of Ed members. It's very important to me and to a lot of parents that I've been speaking with. And I would imagine our staff as well. So I appreciate the efforts behind it. And thank you for listening to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spinks. Any other speakers? That was it, right? That will bring us to our committee reports. If there are no committee reports, then we will go to our policy readings, which is basically what the policy committee has been doing. Let's introduce those.
So tonight we have policy number 0100, which is the second reading tonight. Last week we had the first reading of it. So do I need to begin reading it again? I think we do, right? So this is the non-discrimination equal opportunity policy. The Board of Education, its officers and employees will not discriminate in its programs and activities on the basis of legally protected classes, such as but not limited to.
Move to waive reading, further reading.
So this policy was presented last week. You guys had a week to look it over. Are there any questions? So if we are ready to vote on this policy, can I get a motion to approve this policy as written? Second, all in favor? Thank you.
The next policy we're going to be discussing tonight is
Sorry, all of the other policies that we're reading tonight are first readings, so we'll be revisiting those again next week.
Thank you, Carol. So yeah, this next one is 0101, and it's gender neutral single occupancy bathrooms. Policy for that. All single occupancy bathrooms.
Further reading of policy 0101.
Thank you. So this particular policy would make it so that there is signage that designates any single occupancy bathroom. So bathroom that's just for one person would be considered gender neutral. So anyone could use it, who needs to use that particular bathroom. And there's specific signage that the state education department is recommending we use for those areas to designate them that way. And they also are telling us we need to have this policy. So that's why it's on our, any questions about it?
What does what does the signage look like?
There's a couple different options for it. Some of it just has like a male and a female type of person there, or it could just have a toilet on it. With the word single occupancy.
We don't have any bathrooms like that now.
I believe we probably do.
Yeah, we-
I'm sure each building
we
already
do.
has.
Yeah.
Just about making sure people know it's there.
Correct.
Yeah,
And,
the signage is fine.
and uniform in all 5 school buildings. Uniform meaning that they are present in all 5 schools.
Thank you.
Policy, it's new.
It's a new policy.
It's a new policy, so we've had single occupancy bathrooms, but not
Just didn't have
a policy and, you know, specific designations, et cetera.
So are we required to have a certain number of these types of bathrooms, or is this purely just about signage? If you have them, so we could hypothetically have none of these and be in compliance.
Hypothetically, but we don't. Correct. We do have them. So now.
If you have them, you need to have
We
signage.
identify them, and we identify them through the sign.
Okay.
Back to what the signs might look like. If we go, is there a place like we could go on the state education website and like look at what the proposed sign?
Yeah.
So that's what we can all do before we approve it next week.
Well, that's something
Before we go
that we would do
Okay.
for buildings and grounds. We have a vendor that we work with for signage that are pre-approved state contract to make sure.
But are
that-
there mock-ups online, do you think, that we could get an idea of what they might look like?
Oh, I can find out. Yeah.
Okay, I just would be curious. Thanks.
What? All right, so the next policy that we're going to be doing first reading on is policy 0110. It's on sexual harassment. Sexual harassment is against federal and state law. The board is committed
Move
to
to wait further
maintaining-
reading.
So this particular one has been kind of really quite drastically altered. I mean, some of the wording in it is similar, but they've added 2 subsections to it. We now have 0110, which is an introduction to it and explains what it is. And then there's part 1, which is point 1, which is sexual harassment of students. And then a very similar kind of companion to that is the 0110.2, which is sexual harassment of employees. And they follow similar outlines for both of them, but they are more specific to students versus the employees. And this again is one that is required that we review and adopt these changes to it. Most of the changes, again, like the 0100 we talked about last week, have to do with new laws and things that have been passed prohibiting discrimination against people because of racial traits or their sexual identity. And they get a little bit more explicit than the original ones did as to what those protected classes of people are. Are there any questions there?
So my questions come from being a new board member, so forgive me. Is it typical that at this time of year, the state passes through new policy changes just because there's a whole bunch of these at once? I'm curious.
Now, these are usually sprinkled throughout the year, but we had a lot of other things we were concentrating on. So we sort of left them for the end of the year when the agenda was lighter.
Okay, and then my other question is, if this is something that has, well, first off, who, because I'm not on policy committee, who writes all this? Is this what we're given from NISBA or? Okay.
So NISBA gives us these recommended or required policies with the wording in them and notes in them as to like which specific things we need to look at or address and why they need to be looked at and addressed. They also do all these references at the end with case law and also cross-referencing them to other policies that school districts have. So they come up with that template for us along with these little gray boxes of notes for us to review and to look at as a policy committee. And so we went through those notes, we went through all the recommendations, compared it to the original policy to see if we felt that we indeed should be accepting everything that they're recommending and see if there were any changes or tweaks we wanted to make to it where we were allowed to make, you know, where there were optional things that we could do it. And then we came up with what's being presented to us.
Okay, and if they have,
Sorry, let me just add to that. So depending on the policy, we might have experts from the district come in and advise us as well. Like if it's a healthcare policy, we might have some of the nursing staff come in to advise us, or Joe will usually pull people in if it's technology related, our technology director will speak to us about it. So sometimes there is some wiggle room in the policies and sometimes there's less. In these policies, there was a bit less wiggle room. And the NISBA lawyers wrote these as templates for different school districts. And then there were only a couple places to tweak depending on what kind of services or what kind of programs you have in your district.
Okay, and not that these are, controversial or anything like that, but my question is if we have to adopt them, what, as a board, why do you vote on it?
Because it's required that we vote on it.
So let's just say we were like, no way, we're not adopting this. Then what happens?
Then we would be against legal statute, yeah. And then what would be the penalty? I don't know.
I mean, I'm not against it. I'm asking just from an educational standpoint as a board member. It sounds like we have to vote yes, so there's, right? Okay, cool.
Pretty much, yeah.
And tonight is just the first reading again, so
Yes.
we're gonna revisit this next week and give your thoughts on everybody a chance to look at it a little bit more in depth and for the public to take a look at it as well and see if there's anything that they'd like to.
As board members, that's one of the primary jobs of the board is to set policy. But a lot of the other policies have much more input from the board and the community to customize it. Some of them are just legally required almost as is like these, but the other ones have a lot of community input, how the community wants to see it, the policy. So it's not always just being passed down to us to approve as is.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about this one? The next policy in the last one we're going to be discussing tonight is policy 0115. And it used to be called anti-bullying and harassment, and it is now called student harassment and bullying prevention and intervention. So we've had a name change on the title of it. We can read it. The Board of Education is committed to providing educational and
Wait
working
for the
environment.
reading of policy 0115.
So this one again is responding to laws that have been passed, to defining racial categories and other categories of people. And it goes through, like you'll see on the second page there where it talks about race. This is in reaction to the Crown Act that was passed. It talks about the traits historically associated with race, including not limited to hair texture, protective hairstyles, not limited to braids, locks, and twists. So they go through and they specify the protected classes of people. And then there's some, outlines of very specific actions that the district needs to be taking and is, will be taking when there's accusations of bullying and harassment prevented to. Any questions or comments about this one?
Okay, thank you. So those few will be revisited again next time. If you have any, if you look these over in the interim and you have any questions about them, please bring those to the next meeting, or you can let someone on the policy committee know if it's something that's easy to answer. We might be able to answer it for you. All right, that brings us to our board comments and new business section, which will then bring us to our second audience comment section on non-agenda items. The rules are the same as the prior. Oh, hold on. I think Lisa had a board comment. I went ahead too quickly, sorry.
I didn't remember what it was. Last week we talked about the having a public hearing for the facilities committee with requests to do the repair reserve reallocation of funds. So I was just wondering if we could follow up on that and if we knew anything more about when that would be.
Yeah, the public hearing will take place before next week's board meeting. I And so tomorrow, we already published the time and date in the local newspaper under legal notices. That's one of the mandates and expectations of a public hearing. We will also communicate it tomorrow, website, social media, all of those things. And just like our public forum for the vote, it will be here at 7 o'clock before we begin our board meeting on June 14th.
All right, so that will bring us to our audience comments on non-agenda section. Do we have any speakers this evening? So that will bring us to the end of our meeting. We do have a meeting 1 week from, not 1 week from tonight. We have another meeting next week. We have moved it to the 14th, Tuesday, due to some conflicts on Wednesday. Next week will also be the retirement celebration, so a joyous and sad occasion. It's a little bittersweet. And also public hearing. So we'll be setting a specific time for the hearing so that it won't conflict with the other events that are happening. And that is it. Yes. Okay. So I need a motion to close the meeting. All in favor? Thank you very much. We'll see you next week on June 14th.